Good afternoon and welcome to 365 Days of Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 101, and I'm continuing the story of the third wish. Now remember, we left Mr. Conway with his wife Lieta at the edge of the river, and she was crying with a swan that was next to her, who was also crying. And Mr. Conway asked, "What is this? What is all this?" And she answered, "This is my sister, Rhea, and it is impossible for me to be away from her. I miss her so much," Lieta said. Well, he said, "I could use my second wish to have her assume the form of a human," he said. And at this point, Mr. Conway realized that his wife, Lieta, had originally been a swan. And Lieta said, No, I could never ask her to do that." And when Mr. Conway heard that, he realized that it was very, very hard for Lieta to be a human. And he asked her, "Is it really that hard for you to be a human?" And she said, Yes, it is." Well, Mr. Conway said, "Well then, why don't I change you back into a swan?" And she said, No, I love you. I don't want to be away from you, and who would darn your socks and cook your meals and take care of things for you the way I am?" He said, "Well, I can go back to doing what I used to do by myself," even though when he said that, there was a tinge of sadness within him as he spoke those words. She said, No, I don't want to be away from you." Well, days went by, time went on, and Mr. Conway was especially now observant of what was missing from Lieta's life, this connection with her sister, and also just being in what she had naturally been, which was a swan. And to try to make up for this, he did just everything he could to make life beautiful for her. Took her on trips in the car, bought her beautiful clothing and jewelry, spent a special time with her as often as he possibly could. And with this, nothing really changed for Lieta. She continued to just seem like she was a little bit sad. At one point, she just started making more and more beautiful sweet pastries and tarts and this kind of thing. And Mr. Conway watched one day as she took a basket of them down to the river. He knew to feed or to share with her sister. And then it got to the point where one night, when Lieta was sleeping, Mr. Conway was aware that she was calling out to her sister, Rhea, I can't understand what you're saying anymore. What is it you're saying to me?" And Mr. Conway thought, this has just gone too far. She's losing her ability to talk to her sister and misses her so much. Without discussing this at all with Lieta anymore, he took out from his notebook where he kept the other two leaves, his other two wishes. He took one more leaf out and he threw it in the air, and he wished again for Lieta to be a swan. Well, she was immediately transformed into a swan again. And there in front of Mr. Conway, there she was, with her head tucked under her wing. Mr. Conway, he picked Lieta up in his arms very gently and walked with her outside along the trail down to the river. And there he gently laid her down in the waters. And as he did, he said, "Lieta, Lieta, wake up." Lieta was surprised, of course, at this transformation. She paddled out into the water and turned around and came back, and she laid her head against Mr. Conway's hand. Then she turned around, paddled back into the river, and flew away. Well, later that day, Lieta returned with her sister Rhea. Mr. Conway was there close to the river, and the two swans came up. And he recognized Lieta because around her neck she wore a gold chain, which Mr. Conway had once bought for her. Well, these meetings became a regular thing. Mr. Conway would go down to the river where he had built this chair for Lieta originally to visit with her sister. And two of them, or the two swans, Rhea and Lieta, would come and visit with Mr. Conway each and every day. Now, the townspeople, they all talked about Mr. Conway and that he could talk to the swans, and these two swans had endeared themselves to him. So much so that at one point, thieves came to rob Mr. Conway when he was away. And the two swans saw what was happening and carried the thieves off in their entirety and dropped them in the river. Some of the townspeople, they knew that Lieta was gone, and they knew the whole story, and they say, "Well, Mr. Conway, why don't you wish for a new wife?" He was like, No, I will stay faithful to Lieta." And so it was. So he did. He never used that third wish. He never wished for something else. I would tell you that when he had laid Lieta back into the river, the green man appeared behind him laughing. And he said, I see your two wishes have not brought you much happiness. What will you do with the third? Will you turn yourself into a swan? Or will you turn Lieta back into your wife? Mr. Conway had replied, I will do neither. For swans belong in their natural form as do humans. The green man, he thought this was kind of funny that he was experiencing what he was experiencing. Mr. Conway. The pain of separation, the loss, the sorrow. But Mr. Conway grew from it. He grew in a contentment that was rare indeed in this world, a sense of detachment, a sense of surrender to what it was that came to him. Even in his older age, when he had rheumatism, the damp waters would make it worse. Even though people encouraged him to move to a drier place, he never would. He wanted to only stay close to the river where Lieta was, where he could continue that connection. And it was not very long after that, in his old age, that there was one night where the people of the village, they heard the sorrowful trumpeting of two swans. And in the morning, Mr. Conway was found dead in his bed with a smile upon his face, though, and that last leaf in his hands with a white feather of the swans. And that is the story of the third wish. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining.